Desejar convidar o Mark Bustrum.
Bom dia a todos. So, good morning to everybody. This is a very strange moment we find ourselves in, and we must say that we're very sorry.
I'm very nervous, actually, because we worked very hard to be understood in Portuguese. So to switch to English, we did it for one reason. That's because we're fairly intelligent people. We both have a university degree. But we know in Portuguese our level goes to maybe
third grade.
Yeah. So we thought this is our big chance to use our big words and to actually show that we're really intelligent people. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it in English. Even though it was actually hard to prepare in English.
One of the problems was we kept thinking in Portuguese and then translating it into English. And we kept saying, what is wrong with us? We're saying things in Portuguese and then trying to say it in English, and this is just a big mess. So I hope that you'll be patient with us and understanding as we communicate in English for this one-time special for Fim-de-Semana Cheio. We have kind of a rule in our family, and we have since we got here 8 years ago, that we only speak Portuguese when we're outside of the house. We speak English in the house, of course, with our kids, and we want them to improve their English as well, which is they need to. But we always speak Portuguese outside of the house. So this is a very strange time for us that we're going to speak for half an hour before you in English. We want to introduce ourselves and just kind of talk a little bit more about who we are and why we as an American family are here in Portugal.
But we feel like we have to give a little disclaimer that we don't really speak well for Americans. So although we hold American passports, we would not be a good representation of Americans. So if you ever repeat what we say, don't say that this is American family, because other Americans are going to go, no,
So in 1978, my family moved to Kenya, Africa, and that's where I grew up. And so even though I'm an American and my family's American, I actually had a very different experience growing up in a foreign country as well. So in Hannah as well, her family went in 1988 to Kenya, and so she as well grew up in Kenya, Africa. And in fact, that's where we met when we were 12 years old. So then, after living some time all around the world, because I worked in the military, and for 6 years, we were all over, from Oklahoma to Texas to South Korea to Germany and then back to Washington, D.C. We spent a couple of years in Tennessee, where 2 of our daughters were born. Sahara actually was born in Germany while I was in the military. And after a couple of years in Tennessee, kind of finishing up education and getting all our things ready, we really felt God's call to come to Portugal. And so it's a fascinating thing. I think that's one of the biggest questions that everybody asks us, is why did you come to Portugal? And what Portuguese, I think, are wondering is, why would you leave such an amazing, huge, big country with all those opportunities that come to this country? And so one of the things that we love to tell Portuguese is that, number one, God called us here. God called us to come here and to live our lives here and to share and to serve the Portuguese people alongside the church. But the one thing that I think really makes Portuguese people light up is when we talk about how much we love this country. And so over these last 8 years, we've just fallen in love with the Portuguese people and this country called Portugal. And some of the ways are simple. We love the people. We love how generous they are. We love how warm and welcoming they are. We love the weather most of the times.
Normally, yeah.
We love the beach. We love that culture of sitting around at the cafe and just drinking at a cafe, and conversing and talking, and just not having to worry so much about the time and schedule. Although that can be an issue as well. Not so much for Hannah than it is for me. You know, growing up and then being in the military, if you're 10 minutes early, you're really kind of late. And so, for me, I was always getting in trouble because I would show up maybe 20 minutes early to whether it be a birthday party or a meeting or something. And so literally we would show up to somebody's house and just the grandparents would be there like, what are you doing here? And we're like, we're here for the party. And they're like, it doesn't start till 3. And I said, yeah.
We did this one time, and then I said, we are now on my time. And I say, when we arrive, because I get it. I understand the time here. I'm now not late. In America, I'm late for everything. Here, I'm right on time. It works. So we're on my time here. That's the rule. We don't go when Mark says we go, when we go when I say.
The only time that's an exception is here at the church, because Tiago is more American than goes. And he starts on time every single Sunday. And he's really rigorous with the time.
So when we thought back about our adventure of living here in Portugal, and it has been an adventure. We arrived 8 years ago with 3 tiny little girls, without a word of Portuguese between all of us. And so we have some observations.
Just a few observations about Portuguese culture or living here as an American.
We somehow survived about 30 years without some of the Portuguese essentials. And so we're not sure how, but we've learned in our adventures here how to live better.
So for instance, for 30 years. No idea that you had to eat soba every day. Every day.
I don't know how we survived. I don't know how our children lived to the ages that they lived, but we've since learned that there's no life without soba. So we have incorporated that into our diet.
Every single day. Every day. We have to use soba.
Yes, we've learned. When we first took our children to school here, we of course didn't know Portuguese, had no idea what you were supposed to pack in a lunch. And so a couple months after we had been here, Terza's teacher, Terza was just 3, she sat down with me and she said, I think that you have a level of Portuguese now that you can understand what I need to tell you. So I thought, oh boy, here we go.
It's gonna be bad.
She said, you've been sending your kids lunch, but it's time you need to send them lunch. Because she said, I don't mind giving them mine. I don't mind giving Terza my lunch, but I think you could probably understand how to do that now. And I said, we've been sending their lunch. Have they not been eating it? She said, no, you've been sending their lunch. It's time to send their lunch. Their almoço. It took me a while, and then I thought to myself, there's no possible way that there is a word that's lunch that does not mean lunch. There's no possible way. Those 2 words are so close and do not mean the same thing. We also didn't realize that sending a sandwich was not almoço.
It's not okay. Don't send a sandwich.
That's lunch. We had no idea. So she had been Terza's teacher had been giving Terza her almoço every single day until she thought we could understand enough to explain to us.
So we went on
Terza
this.
had her sopa from the very beginning. It just wasn't that we were sending it.
So after that, we decided that we'd have to learn how to do some Portuguese things, like make soup. So make soup every day. And so we started to ask our friends, how do you make soup? And in very Portuguese fashion, they would say, some onion and some potatoes and just mix it together and it's fine. And I said, no, hold on, tell me exactly, let me write it down. And we always went to this restaurant near our house, and her name was Dona Eva. And Dona Eva was so sweet, but she never wrote anything down. And so I would say, Dona Eva, tell me exactly, line for line, how much cebola? And she would say, just throw some in. How much olive oil? Pour some olive oil. And I said, how much potatoes? A handful. And so I said, okay, we'll try it. So I started to make sopa at home. And I love to cook, so I would make sopa. And the girls, they would say, it's not very good. And so we tried more and more and more, and we tried, and we got a little bit better, but we're still not as good as Portuguese cooks. So our children still do suffer.
They do.
But they do eat
and
sopa.
they let us know that they suffer. Yeah.
So one of the other funny things about coming to Portugal and learning how to integrate into this amazing culture is that we started to realize that whenever your kids were outside in the summer, people would yell at them if they didn't have a hat, right? Like a ball cap, like a hat. And so if you're at the beach and your kid didn't have a hat, complete strangers would come up to you and tell you that your kid has to have a hat.
Give you a hat.
Or give you a hat. Uh-huh. And so we learned this. I can't imagine how I survived all those years in Africa on the equator in the blazing sun without a hat. But thankfully, we were able to come here to Portugal, and our children now wear hats when they're at the beach. So.
And we also learned another important word that came with people giving us hats all the time. Can you imagine what that is? Piolhos. That's another fun fact of Portugal. Nowhere else in the world has the piolhos pandemic that Portugal has.
It's the piolhos capital of the world, we like to say.
It is.
So. Another funny thing is at the beach, you're enjoying a day at the beach and you have your lunch or almoço and you eat it. And of course, we grew up as Americans, you eat your lunch and maybe wait a couple of minutes and then you go jump in the ocean and you have a swim. Oh, no. Not here.
because every Portuguese person has someone in their family who died from getting in the water after eating.
It's true.
It's very unfortunate. You
Yes.
think you guys would learn to
Yes.
stop getting in the water, because everyone has a family member who died.
And we asked, who is this person? Is it your relative, your brother, your sister? And nobody really knows who it is. But somebody
But
did
everyone
die.
has someone in their family who died from
They went
getting
to
in
the
the water
emergency
too
room.
soon. Yeah.
So,
We also somehow survived being wished happy birthday before our birthday. Again, I don't know how. God was very gracious to us to allow us 30 years before we got here to learn these things. In American culture, it would be very rude if you saw someone before their birthday and knew you weren't going to be with them and didn't wish them happy birthday. So we actually, because of Fim-de-Semana Cheio, broke this rule last weekend and celebrated Bria's birthday early. And we're reminded, as every family arrived at the party, that we were indeed cursing our child for the next year of her life, if she even made it to her birthday.
yes, if she made it. So we've tried to explain in our culture or the way that we grew up, that's not a problem. But people still will not budge on that.
Matter.
So it's a strong superstition that we're hoping to break through the might of the church. So we also want to talk a little bit maybe about how our adaptation happened, because language was one of the big parts of that. We literally arrived to Portugal not knowing a single word of Portuguese. And you guys know us. We do speak Portuguese, and I know our children speak way better than we do. And that's still an amazing fact. But one of the great journeys that we were on was how to learn this language. And let me tell you, this language is difficult. Your verbs are very difficult. And so imagine somebody from America coming for the first time and not having any friends, any family, and trying to learn this language. And the great thing is, here's the wonderful thing. We've lived in Germany and we've lived in other places in the world. At least, thankfully, Portuguese are very, very generous people, and they love to engage. And so it's not like up in Northern Europe where they don't want to talk to you. Portuguese are very, very willing to talk to you, and they're excited to help you learn. But man, we have some great stories about what it meant to learn Portuguese. I think maybe one of my favorite was the first week we were here. We're in class, and we actually happened to arrive right before Hannah's birthday. So nobody said parabéns to her. Everybody waited until the day. But then on that day,
I didn't know what was about to happen.
We went to language school, and we were there just learning verbs and learning numbers and learning how to count, all those simple
We were learning
things.
the days of the week and the numbers is really as far as we'd gotten at that point.
And so our sweet professor, our sweet teacher,
Who was a little bit crazy.
Paulo, who was very crazy, all of a sudden, out of the blue, he runs across the room and starts kissing my wife. Like, kissing her. Like, of course, you guys know it's beijinhos, kissing. But imagine an American, and the teacher runs across the room and starts kissing your wife. Just to let you know, in America, we don't kiss each other, okay? We handshake, okay?
Stay very far away.
And so I'm like, I'm ready to fight.
Okay. Actually, he did not. He sat across the room and laughed because I literally flipped backwards in my chair because I did not realize what was happening. My husband was not fighting for me. He was across the room laughing at me.
It was pretty funny. So that was our introduction to beijinhos, or your little kisses that you have, and which are wonderful things. We've grown to love them. In fact, when we go back to America now, we think that Americans are very cold and rude because they just
They
do
stay
a
very
handshake.
far away.
It seems very inappropriate. So you've got to understand, part of this process is that now we're adapting your culture, and we're adapting your way of life, and we're incorporating it into our lives. Paulo was also a very strange guy. He was really dedicated to help us learning the language. And
In
so
his own special way, yes.
he would do stuff like, he wanted us to understand the ow, like cow, that sound, because it's very different for Portuguese.
We don't have that sound in English.
Yeah, so we don't have it. So he says...
He felt like that was probably the most important sound that we needed to learn.
So part of
So every
helping
day,
us learn,
every day,
he would get on his hands and knees and act like a dog.
and bark like a dog
And go in
to
on
try
the
to
ground.
teach us ow, ow.
Go, ow, ow, ow.
In our face. He would get on the floor in our face. And so we thought, oh my word, where have we moved to? Is everyone going to do this to us every time we mispronounce an ow?
So it was very strange. And even to this day, I'll be honest with you, we still have a lot of problems with pronunciation. And I think we can communicate well, but it's still a very, very difficult task. And our kids, bless them,
Make fun of
are
us.
so great. But one thing that we still have to do, even 8 years later, is like when I prepare a sermon to preach on Sunday morning. I say, Bria, can you come help me correct this? Okay. And she helps me correct the sermon. Or if we write an email or sometimes want to communicate in a way, Sahara or Terzi even helps us actually write the message so that we can, or they check it. We write it, but then they check it so that we make sure we're right. So another interesting thing is that as we kind of got into this culture and adapted here as Americans, one of the interesting things that we found were there were some interesting phrases that we had to learn. And these phrases are very important because if you don't understand the meaning behind the phrase, you're going to get it completely wrong. And so, for instance, when you guys say, "en principio," it really means I'm not going to do this.
You're not going to see me there.
It's not going to happen. And so we've learned that if somebody says, if we say, "Hey, can we meet tomorrow for a coffee at 3 o'clock?" and they say, "En principio," we say, they're not going to meet us.
Yeah, don't put it on the calendar. It's not going to happen. Yeah. We also learned that "não tenho vontade" means I'm done with you, pretty much. And I have had a teacher in the middle of class say, "Não tenho vontade, ciao," and that was the end of that. So we like that. We actually like to use that against people as well. Não tenho vontade. Em princípio, vamos ver.
So now we're becoming more Portuguese than Americans is the problem, but it's a good thing. Another funny thing was, I think it might have even been the first day we were here at the airport. I'm getting ready to go through a door.
Not that early. We didn't understand
maybe the first week.
then.
That's true. Maybe the first week. There's a sign on the door, and it says, "Push." And I'm like, what is wrong? It says push. And
we literally stood in front of a door and said, no.
There's no way.
Portuguese, no. Your word for push cannot mean pull. That is not acceptable. That will confuse my brain for the rest of my life. Every time I walk up to a door, I have to say to myself, push does not mean push. Don't do it. Don't make a fool of yourself and pull that door.
And 8 years later, I still push. So if you see me in front of a door like this, just be gentle with me and help me pull it. Another thing that we find hilarious now, and it's a funny thing as we're raising our kids in this country, in this language, is that now they're starting to act more Portuguese than American kids. And so some of the funny things that happen is that, and we're trying to work on this, but their English isn't really great.
Mark's very worried about it. They're fine. They speak English fine.
But so they
have a few things that they directly translate from Portuguese, and it drives Mark crazy. They'll figure it out someday. It's fine.
So for instance, our kids will go up to each other and say, "Hey, can you borrow me a pencil?"
Can you borrow me a pencil?
And that's completely wrong.
That's not correct English.
And so I'm always correcting them.
Confuses only English speakers a lot.
So I'm always correcting them. And it's hilarious because in their mind, it makes no sense. They're totally Portuguese at this point where it makes perfect sense. And so they direct translate a lot of those words.
They think you can ask someone to borrow you something. They think they make years. In English, you don't make years.
You don't make years in English.
You have years.
Yes.
Yeah. You don't make anything at your birthday. You just have a birthday. Yeah. They don't get that. They also finished-ed things.
Right.
Instead of finishing something, they finished-ed it. They think you can just add the ed onto any word and it makes it past tense. They've got several of those. Yeah.
So it's been an incredible journey, and we're looking forward to many, many, many more years. And one thing we learned just early on about this culture is that when we came here, we really did feel very convicted that God was asking to come and give our life in service to this country and to this community. And so one of the interesting things is, as we started out with other colleagues here with our same mission, we started saying things in a different way that really Portuguese people began to appreciate. So for instance, we had friends that came around the same time, and people would ask them, "How long are you here for?" And they would say, "Oh, maybe a couple years. We're just going to try this out and see if it works to live in this culture." And we felt very convicted that we were going to start saying things differently. And so we started saying, in Portuguese, "Queremos ficar cá para sempre, se Deus quiser." And it was like a light bulb went off in our friends' minds and hearts. And that's one amazing thing about the Portuguese culture is that it receives so well outsiders. And so we have felt so well received by not only the Portuguese culture, even though it's funny and we laugh at some of the things, but we absolutely love just the Portuguese culture living here and this process of an American family adapting to Portugal and then really almost becoming a Portuguese-American family or an American-Portuguese family that is here. And so part of that is this community of faith that we're a part of as well. This community of faith has embraced us and invested in us and helped us and given their lives to us. And so we are so excited about what the future holds for our relationship, not only with Lapa, but this community and this city in the future.
Yeah, we're very thankful that God chose for our adventure to be here in Portugal, and we hope that it remains here forever. And there's a new adventure that, speaking of English.
Right, and this was not my idea, so I want everybody to know this. This was Tiago's idea. And sometimes Tiago has these crazy ideas, but this is really a great idea. So me and Tiago have been having these conversations over the past really year, talking about how we can get the gospel in places where it's not. And as we've looked around this city of Lisbon, and it's a very multicultural city, English is spoken by students, by retirees, by people that visit, by people that maybe have a spouse that's American or British or speaks the English language. And so one thing that we've been realizing in the city, there really isn't a lot of opportunity for the gospel to be preached or to reach out. And so we've been talking about a way that Lapa can begin to reach out into the English-speaking community with the gospel. And so it's very exciting, but we're going to, in the near future, start another service in English. And what it's going to be, I know this sounds a little bit strange, but it's going to be a Portuguese service in English. Now, it sounds a little funny, but we're going to try to use the English language because it's so widely used with technology and music and language, all of this, to continue to preach the gospel in this city from this church through the English language. And so we're excited about that. And so if you have friends that maybe speak English or they're here temporarily or they're students or they're visiting or you know somebody maybe that's the spouse is Portuguese and the other one is like English or English speaker at least, please let them know that this is kind of going to be an initiative that we're going to take to help continue to preach the gospel in this city. And we hope that it will be just a reflection of what this church is and the mission of this church in this city. And it's just another way for this church to be active and work and to spread the gospel in this way.
So we're just going to wrap up with one of our other favorite Portuguese sayings that we learned one time when we got to help Terza do a presentation at school. It's not something you do in English, so we think it's absolutely hilarious and adorable. So, o Mark está de parabéns. Falaste muito bem em inglês.
Hannah,
foi uma apresentação muito bom.
A Hannah está de parabéns também, porque foi muito bom o que ela fez.
Thanks, guys.